Welcome to the Hive 3D printer, a series where I turn a Tronxy X5SA and a Rig V-Core 4 into my own custom printer. In our previous episode, we put together the frame for this printer, and in this episode, we're going to be assembling the Z-axis, the heat bed, and adding some linear rails for the Y. So let's get into it. So now we're going to be cleaning off the linear rails with some isopropyl alcohol, and then adding ourselves some T-nuts to them. We're going to be taking those parts and attaching an H15 block to the H15 linear rail, and then we're going to be taking that and mounting all the components to it. So the components we have are the lead screw nut, a coupler, and a bunch of screws. So initially, we're going to use some 12mm long M3 bolts to attach the part to the top, and then realize that they're a bit too long for the bottom, so we're going to switch out to some 10mm ones. We're going to take that entire assembly there and attach it to the linear rail block with some M4 screws that are pretty long. We've got like 100mm and I think 60 or 80. We can then take that entire assembly, bring it to the frame, and then start assembling it. So we're going to line it up with the T-slots, and then we're going to take our little guides. So I couldn't find any proper guides online for this size of rail, so what I'll do is I'll provide all the guide blocks that I used in this episode in the description below if you decide to use some 15mm rails on some 2020 extrusion. We're just going to go in, loosely tighten these guys just so it kind of stays in place, and then afterwards we're going to come back and tighten it, but you don't need to see me doing that. Next up, we're going to put in the two missing screws that I didn't have the last time, and then we're going to put a thrust bearing between the coupler and the base plate. So we're going to tighten that guy down for the time being, and then add the cool fancy lead screw that's special for this machine, because I ordered the one that's specifically for this one. That doesn't seem to be used for some of the other ones. So we're just going to be attaching the top end stop for the rail block, and then adding the guide rail for the lead screw, just so it doesn't wobble up near the top. Now we're going to take the same assembly for the left and the right side, and then do that again, just so that we have it on the side as well, because the first one we did was on the back. So we more or less repeat the same thing, and then put that all together. So a lot of this has been a long time in the making. I've had these parts sitting around for roughly a year now, and they're finally being put into the machine itself, which is pretty satisfying, especially when you just kind of get to make your own design and then finally put it all together. So I'm really happy that it's going together fairly well, and I haven't really ran into any issues, which shows that I did at least a decent job when I was first designing this thing a year ago. So we've got the side one on, and we're just going to be tightening the screws down, and there we go. We've got that side put together as well. And we're just going to be putting the top end stop on, and then the lead screw guide, and we are good to go. Just doing the last little bit of tightening there, and we now have it. Moves nice and freely without any issues, so that is good. So we can now move on to the next part, which will be assembling the heat bed. So I designed this around 4 pieces of extrusion made into a box. So what I'm doing here is I've got a little guide block as well as the little metal ball that does the balancing. So how it's done is I've got a pan head bolt, and it's pretty much resting against the bottom of the V-slot extrusion. And that allows me to pretty much get that inserted in there without much trouble. The only thing is, once I've screwed the entire thing together, the one with the bolt on the left side and the right side becomes kind of hard to access without taking the bolts out that I'm inserting right now. So we're just making sure it's nice and square when I'm tightening this all down. And then what we'll do is move on to the heat bed itself. So I'm going to have to take out the existing 6 screws inside of here. And then we're going to be using a custom 3D printed spacer, just because it seems like the traces are attached onto the base sheet of the aluminum. I didn't want any of them to be damaged, so I had to make some custom spacers that are 5mm on the top and then 20mm on the bottom, so I make a nice contact area with the extrusion. So what we're doing now is we're just lightly putting the bolts through and just kind of pushing the head of it through, as well as putting some T-nuts on there, so I'll be able to slide it onto the base of it. So what we're doing now is we're just kind of aligning it on the bottom there and just kind of trying to slide it on. Just having a little bit of trouble here, trying to figure out what the best orientation for this is. but I got it in the end. The only thing is the cables have a little plastic covering, which was kind of squishing on the edge there, so I had to kind of push it. But down the line, I end up just getting rid of it because it's kind of unnecessary because there isn't actually any strain on the cables. It's just the plastic coating that was giving me some issues. So down the line, we'll be taking that off, but for now, it's still there. We're just making sure that the edge of the bed is parallel to the edge of the aluminum frame, just because for the actual printer, it uses a 1/4 inch or 6mm aluminum plate, which kind of reduces the need for the entire extrusion frame. But here we got our 3D printed parts that balance the balls. The only thing is there doesn't seem to be heat set insert for the assembly itself. And I'm not sure if they intend you just to screw plastic into there, but if I'm not mistaken, these are actually supposed to be out of like aluminum or steel, but currently I'm just going to have them 3D printed, and down the line we'll see if we can maybe make them on the Carvera Air. So now what we're doing here is we're grabbing the heat bed and kind of sliding on those little balancing blocks to the 3 different spots with the balls, and now we're just trying to kind of align it to the base plate. So I'm not sure if it makes a difference whether or not the balls are perfectly centered, but because currently on mine, they're not perfectly centered, but it seems to work fairly well. And here we're just screwing in the M6 bolts that I had. They're just a little bit long, so I had to make a little 3D printed washer. So here I'm just kind of looking at it to see what's going on, but it seems fine. And now we're going to be moving on to just the cable track here. So as I said, the plastic piece got in the way, so we kind of got rid of that. And now we're just able to mount the cable chain directly onto the frame itself. And it's just kind of hanging down at the bottom, so we'll have to make something there just so that it doesn't do that. But for now, it's fine. And here we're just peeling off the nice sheet of plastic and grabbing the bed that has been sitting around and got super dusty for a long time. But now we can put on the clips that hold the bed in place, and it will be good to go. It is no longer a Tronxy printer, but it still has its roots there. Now we're going to be attaching the linear rails to the top here. So I had to take off one of the screws on the sides there, or else I wouldn't be able to slide it on, because these ones aren't the slot in place ones. They're the static ones where you just have to slide the rails in first. We've got another spacer here that I made. It's very simple. It just follows the same profile as the linear rail and then has a 20mm wide gap on the bottom. And then all we got to do is just tighten all those down and it's good to go. So I didn't attach the 3D printed pieces in the back because there's going to be a stack up of plates that go there down the line, and I was just kind of using them as a rough guide just so I have them in place. So the rails spun very nice and freely, and I cleaned them with a bunch of IPA before I placed them on there, so there shouldn't be any issues with them, and they were gliding nice and slowly. They did come with those nice little blue end stops, which kind of prevented me from having to worry about them falling off, which was great because they were a lot more free moving than the other ones, the 15mm ones. So here we have it. So here is the printer in its current state right now. So we have the Y linear rails, which move nice and freely. Then we have the front left Z lead screw, which moves. And then we got the back middle one. You can see that the cool thing about this printer is as I move each of the individual ones, it still manages to stay in place. So I don't think you can do non-planar printing with this, but it still is a cool way to level your bed. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hive 3D printer. If you did, I'd appreciate if you'd leave a like, a comment, or subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.